So what is it about the news that makes it such an essential hub that keeps people constantly going back for more? Well, there's the need for information, and then there's the fear of the consequences of not having it. Now, is the need for information justified? I believe it is. And let me give you an example. If someone's depressed and they're looking down to hide their neck and their eyes, and this is on an unconscious level. The reason why they're hiding their neck is because they don't want that vital part, that important part that is transferring blood, supplying the brain with blood, to be attacked. It's a very vulnerable area. Like I said, this is on a primal level, on an unconscious level. And the reason why the person doesn't want to look up and wants to hide their eyes is because if they lock eyes with anyone else that is a potential predator, that potential predator will spot the weakness and vulnerability in their eyes and would want to attack them. The problem here is that the more we hide our vulnerabilities, the more we reveal them. And in this case, even though the aim of that person or the intention, the unconscious intention behind hiding the neck and hiding the eyes is to protect oneself, but what that depressed individual is also doing is depriving themselves of the essential information that the environment can provide them. That information can only be provided visually through our visual senses by looking up. And so as soon as that individual looks up, what they are telling, what they are revealing to anybody that is looking at them is that they do not perceive anyone else as a threat, and that calms people down. What it also does is it conveys confidence, and it immediately elevates the level of control that that person has because they're accessing more information. Why do we need information? In order to prepare, in order to predict, and in order to protect. If there's any potential enemy, we can see them from a distance. We can calculate and be more strategic, but we have information that can help us protect ourselves. Not to mention, locking eyes with another individual is a sign of control, is a sign of power. It doesn't reveal the vulnerability as much as it reveals to the other person that they are not a threat, and they don't perceive the other individual as a threat. Now let's talk about fear for a second. Fear is the seed that gives birth to all negative emotions, from sadness to guilt to shame to frustration to anger to resentment, and the list goes on. And there's so many different types of fear, but in a global crisis, there are usually 4 types of fear that show up, and they're very strongly linked to one another. The first is the fear of change, and we fear change because we fear the unknown, which is the second type. And the reason why we fear the unknown is because we fear the loss of control. Because because it's an unknown, we can't predict it, we can't protect ourselves from it, and therefore we cannot control it, so we fear a loss of control. And that's the third type. And the reason why we fear the loss of control is because we fear for our survival. If we don't have enough control in order to protect ourselves, to keep ourselves alive, then we are threatened. Our survival is threatened. And the reason why we fear the loss of control is the final type of fear, which is that we fear death. So in a way, we fear change because we fear death, if we were to shorten the sequence. Now, just to get back to the unknown for a second, the more unknowns we have, the more we fear the unknown, the more we amplify that fear. And there are a lot of unknowns going on right now. In a global crisis, there are a lot of unknowns that happen anyway. Now let's get back to the importance of information. We follow the news because we are hoping that the news will provide us with 3 things. Number 1, hope, which gives us comfort. Number 2, closure. And number 3, actionable steps. The news will provide us with information, but I think a very important question that we need to ask is it helpful? Is it useful? Because we don't want to start, or we don't want to become information hoarders. So let's explore each of these 3. Let's talk about hope for a second. Does the news provide us with hope? The answer is yes. However, it provides us with a drop of hope in an ocean of hopelessness. There's a lot more hopelessness that we are receiving from the news than hope. So it may provide us with hope, but the question is it providing enough hope that justifies pursuing the information that the news is providing? The second is closure. Does the news actually provide us with closure? The news is a machine that is designed to be a never-ending story. It thrives on continuity. Of course, it will never provide us with closure. And finally, actionable steps. Now, does the news provide us with actionable steps? Well, governmental updates can provide us with actionable steps on how to take care of ourselves, what to do next, stay at home, wear masks. So the governmental updates that we receive will provide us with that, and the news can help with that. So from that angle, yes. But in general, does the news provide us with actionable steps? The answer is no. It does not provide us with actionable steps. If you take a step back and look at the month that just passed, just look at that month. What are the different pieces of information that you have received that keep repeating themselves as a pattern? Number of cases, number of deaths, increasing, decreasing, lockdown lifted, lockdown extended, treatments, preventions that are potential, involving trials, and there's a trial phase that hasn't really been finalized, and it's based on predictions that aren't really accurate. And then on top of that, we are receiving information about the effects of what the global crisis that we are constantly living in is affecting, the effects on the economy, the effects on healthcare, and it's just more examples. But that's the pattern that keeps happening. None of that stuff, none of that information is actionable. We are passive receivers of information we cannot control. The information we are receiving is information we cannot use. So let me ask you again, is it useful? And if your answer is yes, my question is it useful enough? Which brings me to the final point. The news reminds me of the Skinner box. If you haven't seen my React video about loot boxes, I highly recommend you check it out. It touches upon the Skinner box at the beginning of the video. The Skinner box is a box created by B.F. Skinner, a behavioral psychologist that researched and studied behavioral conditioning to see if animals and humans can be conditioned to behave differently. And it was basically a box with a button, and whenever the subject presses a button, a reward is given to the subject. Now, what he found is whenever the button is pressed, if the reward is granted every single time the button is pressed, the subject gets bored and loses interest. But if the reward is granted sometimes, not in every single time the button is pressed, that entices the subject to keep pressing the button and sometimes pressing it indefinitely. And what's interesting about that is the spikes of dopamine do not happen when the person receives a reward, but it happens during the anticipation period before getting a reward. The way I'm seeing it is the news has unintentionally turned into a global Skinner box where we are constantly pursuing that drop of hope in an ocean of hopelessness. In other words, we are addicted to the news because we are addicted to the anticipation of hope. On my next video, I will share the 5 types of information we are receiving from the news and social media, the psychological effects that they can have on our mental health, and what we can do to protect ourselves from them. Just to be clear, it is important to remain informed. But what's more important is the way we engage with the information we receive. In other words, the real question to answer here is, how can we benefit from the information provided in a way that doesn't negatively affect our mental health? I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe. If you have any ideas of any videos or any topics you'd like me to make, please mention them in the comment section below. And I wish you an amazing morning, evening, afternoon, night, wherever you are. Bye for now.